Good evening, everyone. I call to order this special meeting of the Auburn City Council for July 31st, 2017. The purpose of this evening's meeting is exclusively for a public hearing on the consolidation agreement as proposed by the Joint Charter Commission for Lewiston, Auburn. I'm going to walk through a few ground rules and the plan for tonight, and then I will open the public hearing. We're going to ask that anyone who wishes to speak, in the interest of allowing as many of you as possible to speak, to keep any comments or questions to 5 minutes or less. I'll try to give you a signal as your time comes to a close, and just ask that all of you try to be respectful so everyone can have a chance to speak that wishes to. I will ask folks to come up and offer questions or comments in this particular order. We'll start with citizens of Auburn that are here and wish to speak, followed by any Auburn taxpayers that are here and wish to speak, and third, anyone else that is here who wishes to provide their comments. There is a microphone to my left, and to your right, our Assistant Manager Denise Clavet is here, tending to the mic and can help line you up. Our manager Peter Creighton, midway back. We'll see if we can extend the line all the way to him. When I open the hearing, rather than wait for the person speaking to finish and then make your way to the microphone, I would just ask that folks begin to line up that wish to speak so we can again be efficient. This is a public hearing. It is not a workshop. It is not a debate. So you will not hear answers to questions you may ask, and this is not a time to ask for the council to weigh in unless any of them wish to come to the microphone and speak. During our workshop to lay out this public hearing, Charter Commission member Chip Morrison was there, and the request that we made of the Joint Charter Commission, which I believe they will hold, is that they will convene a meeting of the Charter Commission following this hearing to take up any of the comments or questions that were received. So the Charter Commission will receive a full record of tonight. Great Falls TV is here and staff are here. We will provide them with the record of the meeting and ask that they provide any responses to comments or questions, and we'll work with staff to do everything possible to make sure that their responses are made available on the city website and everywhere else that the consolidation agreement is available. As all of you know, the consolidation agreement has been scheduled for a November 7th vote in the city of Auburn. And per state law, this is the required public hearing for the city of Auburn. And with that, I will open the public hearing. Again, any Auburn citizens wishing to provide comments or questions, we just ask that folks begin to line up at the podium, if you will. Thank you. Nope, there's a microphone right over there, Mr. Wellahan. So again, if any Auburn citizens that will wish to speak, if you could come down and begin to line up.
I can't look in front of you.
If when you come forward, if you could please provide your full name and address, that would be great for the record as well. Thank you.
My name is Jim Wellahan, and I live in 60 Woodlawn Avenue in Lewiston, Auburn. And I was born in Lewiston, but so are most of Auburn people. So that raises a real conflict in my mind, but I really liked Auburn people. And sooner or later, an awfully nice girl walked in named Kathy Konecki, and she was an Auburn girl, and we get talking, and I asked her out for a date, and 3 months later, we were married. And it's worked pretty good. That was 50 and a half years ago. And we lived in Lewiston in my apartment first, and then we bought a house over in Maple Ridge, and the people were lovely. And then we were over at Norm Cummings and his wife Ellie invited us to a gathering over on Woodlawn Avenue in Auburn. We went over there, and we really had a good time with everybody, the great people. There were 2 houses for sale on the street. We looked at them and said, boy, that's a nice place. This is a nice street. And so we made an offer, and funny enough, it got taken up. So all of a sudden, we still had a house to sell in Lewiston. I found myself saying, we're moving to the heartland of the enemy. Because I had grown up with Lewiston and Auburn as rivals and so forth, and I understand that feeling. But, you know, as some of you may look at me and think I'm all wet. I was, and I am. But that's not a way to look at it. The people I met in the street in Auburn were my friends. They're good people. And sooner or later, our business, for economic reasons, moved from Lewiston to Auburn, and our headquarters in Lewiston and Auburn. And it's worked out very well for us. We love the city of Auburn, but I'm still, I must admit, down in my heart, I'm a Lewiston boy. And I hope all of you who were born in Lewiston, which is about 98% of you, I hope you feel the same way. Now, I thought about our store, and we've got our office over the store, and it works very well. If we had an office over every one of our stores, we'd be out of business. So there's a need for consolidation, need to put things together, need for efficiency, and having one office where all of our various activities are done in the 6 stores works out so well that I look at Lewiston and Auburn and I say, here we are, one community, let's recognize it and put it together. I did serve in the Auburn Energy Committee some years ago, and we could never get the energy information from Glen Aho, and it's one of those things that is very frustrating because I know we've saved a lot of money in our company for energy. And Auburn hasn't made that choice and hasn't done that. Now, Lewiston makes mistakes, Auburn makes mistakes, and maybe if we put us together, we can make bigger mistakes. But the truth is, there's been a pretty good study. It makes sense. The economic benefit is to Lewiston and Auburn. It will tie us together. It will allow us to save a little bit in taxes, spend a little bit more money on our schools, have more specialized education. This school for STEM, this school for languages or music, whatever it's going to be. We can do a better job for our kids and our grandkids, and maybe keep more of them here. One of the issues we've got is, and I think with our schools, is that there are too many people who are high-income people who live in Falmouth, Cumberland, some such thing, because the schools are better. And I think if we bring those people back, may hurt our Falmouth store or our Scarborough store, but it'll still be good for our Auburn store. It'll be good for everyone in Auburn. So I think we want to make sure this is a place to live where taxes are reasonable and schools are a real value. And as we look at what we're going to do, think about our Congress. If you get the Republicans over here, the Democrats over here, and they can't agree, is that a help or a hindrance? And the England's just chosen to go Brexit, pull out of the EU. And I was reading The Economist today, the latest Economist, saying it's going to be a disaster for England. It's really going to fall apart. So working together, we can do so much. We're all friends. We are one community. Let's do it together.
I'm going to ask the audience to please refrain from responses to individual comments. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilors. My name's Cliff Grime. I live at 48 Longbow Court in Auburn, Maine. And I've been kind of watching and listening and reading all of the commentary that we've heard around this issue. Very big decision. A lot of opinions, but I'd call it 4 common threads exist that I've heard. The first is we all want this community to prosper. And I think I stand here saying I agree with that. Second, we want to attract business here. It's hard to debate that as well. We also want to keep and attract people to live here. I think we all can agree to that. And then I think what we're really debating is how we're going to grow this community and how we're going to redefine ourselves. I've heard a lot of conversation about that. But I think as a single community, we can eliminate much of the politics that have really eliminated that possibility to have a community conversation. With a single community, we can implement a very good visioning process for this community. We can develop and we can register what our assets are and leverage them. My company does urban planning throughout New England. There are many communities doing just that now, and they love the fact that we're not, because they are going to attract all of those 4 items that I mentioned earlier. As a community, we can accomplish much more for less. Jim mentioned it earlier, but when a company or an organization looks to reduce spending or save money, the first thing they look for is consolidation opportunities. That's what we should be doing. We can debate the numbers, but I don't think we can debate the fact that it should make us more efficient and long-term save us money. So if we can move to a single community, there's a 3-step process that I think will lead us to where we need to be. First is a community visioning process that will say, who do we want to be, what do we want to grow to, and who do we want to attract here? Second is basically leveraging the assets we have. We have physical assets, bricks and mortar, that other communities don't. We have real estate here that other communities don't. We have a younger workforce here that other communities don't. And we have a growing community here, as far as numbers of individuals, that other communities don't. Let's leverage those. Then we can develop a strategic plan. How are we going to implement this vision, excuse me, this vision that we came up with in a way that's measurable, logical, and successful? If we put that plan together, this community will move forward in a positive, thoughtful, and strategic way that has been missing for many years. And I don't think I have to tell you the opportunities that we've missed here. So I'm absolutely for one community. Please consider this. It can be done. Thank you.
I'm going after a very tall person. Mary LaFontaine, 113 Western Avenue here in Auburn. So first, I just want to say, we have 5 bridges in this community. We have 3 car bridges, 1 walking bridge, and 1 railroad bridge. And they join us and they combine us. They do not divide us. No one can take our history away from us. Joining our 2 cities to become one will not mitigate any of that history. It will not change all the amazing things that have happened to date, nor the lessons we have learned. Any rules, codes, taxes, fees that may currently be different on each side of the river, if we're one city, they will all be the same. For the ease of business who do business on both sides of the river, that will be good. Pay rates and benefits for our firefighters, police, and staff will no longer be a competition between the 2 cities. Will it take work to get there? Absolutely. But most things that are worthwhile take a lot of hard work. The opposition has yet to provide any data or facts to prove or discount the charter's report that was published. Until I get that information, I will believe and support the work of the charter and that report. Schools, they've been mentioned twice already. We have an incredible opportunity to build a system that is better than our 2 separate school systems, one that allows growth, specialties, and potential beyond what we can even imagine. Opponents say we can do these things without joining our 2 cities and becoming one. I say, if that's the case, why have we not yet done that? Competition and turf battle will continue to prevent growth and opportunity where we've stated it. My ask of our city leaders: speak for the city as a whole, not just those who are aligned with your personal beliefs. If you are in opposition and you say you speak for the residents, you are wrong, because you do not speak for me in that statement. We have a huge opportunity to be leaders and be innovative. Let's take it for our youth and for our future.
Christy Finney, 165 Whitney Street. Here's some of the feedback that I'm seeing in response to the One LA campaign. Things are good enough. Change can't happen here. The river divides us for a reason. I don't want to lose my heritage. Keep us separate, or simply just no, exclamation point. It's disheartening to see neighbors yelling at and attacking each other through the anonymity of social media. We need to take a big step back and stop pointing out the negatives of our neighbors across the river. We need to stop looking back and instead look to the future and recognize the positives that currently exist to make the Lewiston-Auburn community, and it is one community, marketable and sustainable for future generations. This joint community has always been connected, either by name, by the river, or by the rich heritage that was started by our ancestors who put down roots here. It is those Milltown roots that have led to generations of Milltown guts and pride that spans the river without distinction to Lewiston or Auburn. It's time to put those guts to good use. We need to acknowledge that a combined city of 60,000 people brings new and different opportunities to help put Lewiston-Auburn on the map, and in the conversation with business and economic development opportunities that we cannot achieve as separate entities. It gives us a reason to be in the room while bickering and competing with each other or calling names across the river is not working. I'm currently an Auburn citizen who left Maine 4 times for what I believe to be better or greater opportunity. As the daughter of a local factory worker, I felt it took more guts to strike out on my own and make a name for myself anywhere but here. But I always came back. I just couldn't quit Maine. And what I finally realized is that it actually takes more guts to come back to where you're from and make something work, to expand on the opportunities that exist and make an impact on a place where you have a stake in the outcome, where you can create positive change that helps your neighbors who you actually know and care about. When I'm driving across the bridge tomorrow morning to go to work in Lewiston, I won't feel different once I land on Lisbon Street, any different than I did when I left Court Street to cross the bridge. It really can be that simple in a unified Lewiston-Auburn because it already is that simple. I believe in One LA because I believe in the power we collectively have to take this community to the next level. We no longer need to sit around feeling jealous of growth or development in Brunswick, Bangor, Portland, or Biddeford, but in order to do that, we need to decide that being more and thinking boldly is more important than being the same as we have always been. We need to believe that we are capable of better and that we have the resources and guts to take our future into our own hands. We can't sit back and wait for opportunity to knock. We need to build our own door and tell everyone that we're ready to be as dynamic and successful as our predecessors. We need to let younger generations know that they don't need to go away to find opportunity. At the end of the day, there are many ways to drive change and find efficiencies. That said, the unification of Lewiston and Auburn just happens to be the only one that has been researched and recommended 4 consecutive times. What are we waiting for? What are we afraid of? Success? Efficiencies? Opportunities? Because if we don't take this chance, other cities will. They're already watching to see what we'll do. Will we be saying how we thought of it first? If so, the conversation will fade quickly when we realize that we did nothing about it. Will we still feel good enough then? Leading is hard and complaining is easy. It's time to show the rest of Maine what we're made of.
Neighbors, friends, business people, associates. My name's Dan Thayer. I've been a resident and a business owner in the city of Auburn for more than 25 years now. Grew up in Minot, actually, a small town. You may know it. Growing up as a country boy, you know, you learn to keep yourself occupied. There's not a lot of things that community activities you could participate in. You keep yourself entertained. I was always envious of all the opportunities that my neighbors in Auburn and Lewiston had to get together and do things. And I remember the first football game my dad took me to. Guess what? Lewiston High Blue Devils against the Red Eddies. It was quite an experience for a 6-year-old, especially considering a brawl ensued, which I look back on it now. It was deeply troubling to a 6-year-old. And I asked my dad, why is that? Why are they fighting? They're from Auburn and they're from Lewiston. He goes, because they feel they're different. Well, I've remembered that. Every time this comes up, I remember, what is it about us that is so different? So let's shift it a little bit more towards the rationale for the consolidation. Like a number of people here, I've worked on the Lewiston-Auburn Economic Growth Council before it was a swear word. I still work on the Auburn Business Development Corp., Maine Community Foundation, and many volunteer capacities like I see so many familiar faces here. None of that was for personal gain. It was because it was a way of giving back. And to see the effect of the divisiveness is deeply troubling because as a company, we only survive by recruiting and retaining the best people. We're in an unparalleled labor demand market, and I spend probably 40% of my time as a president and owner of the company recruiting people, and it's as far away as from out of state to northern Maine to central Maine, selling Lewiston, Auburn. Because if we don't have the quality of employee, we don't have a business, and there's a dire need for us to be considered one. When we were doing the heavy lifting work of the Economic Growth Council, we saw the businesses that would come in from out of state looking to locate here. And when we acted as a cohesive unit, we won. We recruited these companies. They saw it as what's happening. You can frequently learn more about your own community by having folks tell you from the outside what it looks like. Well, I travel a lot. Southern Maine is a big market for us. When I go to meet the clients in Portland, they'll say, man, you guys got it going on up there in Lewiston, Auburn. Your economic growth is just launching. This was 5 years ago, maybe 5, 6 years ago. You guys have got it going on. What is it? How do you get the level of volunteerism that you do? We've got the strongest chamber in the state of Maine. Just as an example, we've got an incredible spirit when we work together as an economic unit to set the pace for others to follow, not by being divided. So simply it comes down to a matter of what is a community? A community is a place where people work, live, learn together, and it's not any one of those, it's all of those. So when we were doing the work on the Maine Community Foundation, we started this initiative around social capital. I didn't even know what that meant. I still have a hard time knowing what that means. And social capital it's like one of those things that's, well, how do you define pornography? I don't know, but I'll tell you when I see it. And it really is the best way of understanding it. When we had the immigrant population suddenly come into our community, there was a lot of divisiveness and a lot of conjecture. But this community stepped up and said, no, we're one community, one economic unit, and we've absorbed those necessary immigrants into our population as well as any community has. So one last story. I was fortunate enough with the Rotary to help with some of the interviews of the mill workers when we did a mill worker reunion. And the Museum LA was recording a lot of these living histories, I think they call them. And I recall one story about a gentleman who worked in the mill, and he said he returned home after working a double shift at the mill. He lived on Snell Hill and Turner. He said, lived out of town. Got home late, all I saw was fire trucks. His worst fears, he had 5 young children at home. You can imagine the fears. Well, his house burned, leaving only the barn. And here he was, the day before Christmas, and he had no home for his 5 young children and wife. He went to work the next day, nevertheless, and upon returning the next night, which would have been Christmas Eve, he said, when I pulled in my long driveway, there was a whole series of lights, and he said to himself, what worse could it be? What could have happened now? And there were about 6 trucks full of furniture and house goods all from his fellow mill workers that went there, and he said he was in tears because he always felt he was an outsider. He lived in Turner, he didn't speak French, he was a Catholic. He never felt like he was truly part of that Bates community. But that's a powerful statement to understand that communities don't have fences. We're one community, one economic unit, and I hope that we memorialize this by taking it to the next level and doing what we can now. Thanks.
There's a vehicle with the license plate NVR2 late. Your lights are on. That's Powerball number 2. All right. Sorry, Mr. Leonard, go ahead.
Councilors, good evening. Thank you for hosting this event tonight. I guess I'll be the anomaly, being the first one to speak in opposition to the merger. I'll offer an opinion, and I think the purpose of tonight's public forum is to elicit questions for the Joint Charter Commission, so I'll pose 3 of those at the conclusion of my remarks. Being an Auburn resident, I live at 441 Lakeshore Drive. I also own property at 21 Winter Street. By that very nature, I pay a lot of taxes, so I would consider myself being in 2 categories. And I moved here for a job 2 years ago, believing in the potential of these communities. I've become disheartened that we've put all of our eggs in one basket on an idea that is an old idea. It's not innovative. It failed in an election 50 years ago. We've had 4 commissions. It's taken 4 years to get to this point. And furthermore, if this were to pass, on November 8th, we're going to start a 26-month process of figuring out how to put the cities together. So I'd ask you, all the challenges that have been discussed, that are agreed upon on either side, can we afford to wait another 3 years to address them? This council and the mayor's leadership has resulted in more economic development in the last few months than anything I've seen in 2 years. In my previous employment, I was a point person in recruiting companies here, and not one of them asked, are you merging your cities because that's why we want to move here? It's simply a fallacy. The companies that move here because of the assets that the communities provide. It's not about a merger. The 3 main points about the merger, about saving money, having more political clout, and being the reason for economic development, is false. We already have our representatives in Augusta in leadership. Merging them changes that how? Will we get more representatives? Probably not. If you look at the taxes, and my closing questions are going to relate to those, when has government ever self-elected to decrease itself in size? Now, we've heard a lot of to-do about the merger, and the fact is it's easy to study, and I've spent 2 years before I took my last position studying that. And it's easy to look at because the reality is there's only been 10 city-to-city mergers in the last 30 years in the US and Canada. Not one of them achieved the results that are being promised today. Stats have been provided. Examples have been provided, but the simple fact that they're ignored doesn't make them less true. Now, you may be for the merger or against the merger, and that may be an emotional argument, but from my analysis, the facts simply show that the merger will not provide the benefits that are being posed. So my 3 questions that I'd like to see the council look into for further clarification from the Joint Charter Commission would be: first, I believe in my reading that public law requires up-to-date data, and the data, the numbers used for the Joint Charter Commission's report was FY16. My question is that considered current and sufficient for the voters in November? Second, it appears that the data used for Lewiston property evaluation was estimated data or self-reported data that was open source and not actual city data, which leads to believe in that analysis that those numbers are grossly overstated, that being the estimated property value and tax revenue generated by Lewiston property tax. I believe that's true based on communications I've seen from the city administrator in Lewiston. I'd like to see those numbers reconciled with the report. Lastly, there are a lot of discrepancies in what's been reported. I would like to see a reconciliation of proposed savings with costs that aren't included in those equations. 2 prime examples being that the harmonization of increased union costs by combining unions and having to renegotiate that are estimated at $1.6 million in accordance with the Joint Charter Commission, however, are not subtracted from estimated savings. And another example being a refunding of the Lewiston Auburn Economic Growth Council at or above its previous funding, which is not accounted for from a cost perspective. Those examples and numerous others, seeing as I only have 5 minutes, I believe need to be brought forward and get a real representation of the numbers, because whether we want to admit it or not is about the numbers is the number 1 point for a merger. Thank you.
My name,
I'll again ask folks to please be respectful. We want to have people have a chance to comment, and we'd rather not have responses from the audience after every comment.
good evening. My name is Sharon Bowden, and I live on 17 Birch Road in Auburn. And I'm glad I stood up behind this gentleman because I'm very concerned about joining two communities together with the rosy promises that have been made, because bigger isn't always better. I really believe that coming from working in a school department, when you start combining schools together, school districts together, when you're looking at combining cities, it's all a microcosm of, as you build up and you're looking at state government and federal government, bigger isn't better. It doesn't create the efficiency that you're ending up looking for. In public money, cities, counties, and the urge to merge in October of 2012 says that it doesn't very often happen that you get the efficiency that you're looking for when you combined cities together. It goes on further to say that one of the reasons you're not going to be saving money is because when you start looking at salaries and benefits and combining all of these people together under one heading, that basically things get rounded up. They don't tend to be rounded down. And it's not that I don't want both communities to succeed. I really believe that they can. And I can remember not living in Lewiston, Auburn, and living up north and thinking, Lewiston, Auburn doesn't sound like a very nice place. And that was years ago. And that has all changed. And that's because of all the work that you've been doing. And I'm for that continuing. I'm also for continuing to perhaps look at joining forces where you can do that without having to put cities together or school districts together. Also in the same article, it says between 1921 and 1996, there were 132 formal consolidation attempts, with only 20 successful, according to the history of consolidations. And then it goes on, in the 1990s alone, there were 13 unsuccessful consolidations, referenda votes. Now going back to the school departments, in some of the research that I looked at under what does research say about school district consolidation dated July 2011, that unfortunately research on consolidation, and I'm not sure that that's exactly what you're thinking, but if it is, I think this speaks to that it does not define guidance for making such decisions. It's very difficult. But what came out of the research is basically that out of the Ohio legislation, Office of Performance Evaluations out of 2009, what they came up with, there were 3 areas that consolidation of services works, and that's the purchase of supplies, whether that's city or a school, transportation, and staff development. And I see staff development as being one that could really benefit school departments on both sides of the river by being able to bring in quality people to do that kind of programming for us. And that doesn't require school districts to be joined as one. In their summary, the major findings from the literature, there is no compelling reason for believing that consolidation, and this is talking schools, not towns, but again, I think it's kind of a microcosm of the whole thing, for believing consolidation automatically leads to cost savings. Studies of consolidation yield overall estimates of cost savings that are relatively modest, with the largest percentage of savings occurring from consolidating very small districts. Consolidation may increase costs in some areas for more than a decade. A number of states encourage districts and local agencies to enter into cooperative purchasing agreements. In these states, substantial numbers of agencies have done so. Planning for consolidations should consider not only expected benefits, but also unintended consequences, both positive and negative. And I guess that's what I'm hoping that people are going to be looking at is I'm hearing from people that are very compassionate and they're very excited and they're speaking with their heart about how much they love this area. And I think that that doesn't have to stop. We don't have to be one to love the area. We don't have to be one to bring people in. Our brick and mortar isn't going to change. Any of that is not going to change. We have what we have, and we just need to get up and push forward on that. And I don't think by making us bigger, it's going to help. Thank you.
I'm James Ayotte. I work in Lewiston, but I actually live in Auburn at 68 Brentwood Drive. My wife and I just bought our home there this past winter. So we do a lot of thinking about the future. And that's kind of what brings me here today. There's two main points against the merger that I just wanted to give my feedback on. They're kind of used as negatives against the merger, but I actually think that they're positives, and I'd like to try to clear that up from my perspective. One is that there's no guarantees, there's no certainties, and there's no guarantees that all the numbers are going to come out and everything is going to be great. I think that's a valid argument that we need to talk about. And the second one is that there's no magic wand that we can wave, and it's not going to happen overnight. And I've seen those two arguments against the merger quite a bit, and I want to acknowledge both of them, and as somebody who's for the merger, agree with them. Those are accurate. But I don't think that's how people are actually advertising this merger. When I look at it, I know it's going to be tough. It is not going to happen overnight. It's an investment into the future. That's the whole point of it. So the question was posed, can we afford to work on this for the next 3 years? I would say, can we afford not to look forward to the future beyond those 3 years? That's an important piece. And then the second thing is, no, there's no guarantee for really anything in life. Everybody who gets married and gets a new job and has a baby and everything that you can think of, there is no guarantee. But we analyze the risk, we analyze the reward, and we make the best decision that we can. And I think that that's how I look at the merger. So no, there's no guarantees with things, but I think that we have to move forward with the best set of ideas possible. So thank you.
Kyle Butler, 25 Bolster Street. 60-mile radius. Any business that's going to move here and increase our economy looks at a 60-mile radius if it's big enough to do what you think it's going to do. Some mom and pop store, they might choose one side or the other. But there will be no change. 60 miles is how they analyze where they move their businesses. Our population isn't going to double because we merge. Our population stays the same. Taxes, Auburn residents. Your taxes are going to go through the roof before the proposed savings start. And the Charter Commission's document admits it if you've taken the time to read it. Our municipal employees make less money. That affects our taxes. That all has to be balanced. Every school teacher is going to get a raise. Every fireman, every policeman. Now, maybe they deserve a raise. If they do, then let's give them one. But they don't deserve a raise just because we're going to become part of Lewiston. Sorry, I'm passionate about this. I lost track. How about individual costs? How many of you live on a tree street, whether you're in Lewiston or Auburn? You got to change your address, change all your credit cards. Is the new government going to get us our new licenses, or we have to change the address on our license? No, we'll all be down at DMV together. That's a long line. Okay, I guess that's it. Like the other guy, I own multiple properties. This is going to affect me more than some. And I also am sorry I interrupted your one I lay rally.
Hi, my name is Bruce Ryu, and I live at 85 Mary Carroll Street in New Auburn. And when I was born and brought up, I was born and brought up on 61 River Street on the 4th floor in Little Canada. And when I went out on my porch, I could almost see the house that I live in now on the top of the hill in Mary Carroll Street. And when the leaves are down, I can almost see the apartment house I grew up on in Little Canada. So it's kind of ironic. I've lived in both cities and really never very far away from my birthplace. I've owned businesses in both Lewiston and Auburn. And I stand here not because a merger is going to benefit me, but because my son, who's 31, and my daughter, who's 23, I hope that they're going to settle down in Lewiston, Auburn, and have the opportunities that these cities have given me. And in order to do that, I believe we have to merge. Now, the gentleman that has a house on Lake Street and then another property on Summer, if your house was on Lake Street and Summer in Lewiston, by my estimates, you would have paid for 2 city managers, 2 superintendents, 2 police chiefs, fire chiefs, head of public works, 2 finance departments, 2 recreation departments. I think your taxes, if they're in a merged city, all of a sudden you're only paying for one of those department heads or those departments. So automatically there are going to be cost savings. Are the savings going to be the same as what is written in the book? I don't know. But in my opinion, there are going to be some significant cost savings because we're not going to be paying for 2 departments doing the exact same thing, one on one side of the river and the other on the other side of the river. Now, let's talk about lifestyle. I told you I was born and brought up on River Street. And for probably 18 years, I only went to one church, St. Mary's. Then I met the woman who's now my wife, who lived on Russell Street. She attended St. Pat's. And until I started dating her, I'd never been in St. Patrick's Church, and I've lived here my whole life. Now, I go to the 4 o'clock Mass, and I sit behind that row right over there. We all have our own pews, Anita and all of us. And we sit behind each other. We all at the 4 o'clock Mass, unless we have something to do. Then we go to the 8:30 Mass at Holy Cross, or the 9:15 Mass at St. Philip's, or maybe the 10 o'clock Mass at St. Peter's. And the point I'm trying to get is, this is a different life. It's different for us. We used to be ingrained, and we had one, if you lived in New Auburn, you never left New Auburn. You went to St. Louis Church, and that was it. Today, it's different. We travel, we go wherever it's convenient for us, and the cities are really one. So let's merge them. Let's cut the duplication of expenses, and let's make this a great place for our children to grow up in the future. The benefit's not going to be mine, because I'm too old. But it is going to be my kids if we merge. Please think about it and support the merger. You're just taking notes.
My name is Stephanie Crystal. I live at 26 Washington Park Road in Auburn. I am a voter, and I am a senior citizen. I'm also hearing impaired, which some of you have seen. So if you can't hear my voice, that's why, because I can't hear how far I'm projecting up. I am opposed to the merger for a few reasons, because I don't have my questions answered about how it's going to benefit Auburn. I have lived in Lewiston. and I have now lived in Auburn. I'm also an advocate. I do a lot of my advocacy in Lewiston, and that's fine to a certain point. What concerns me is general assistance in Auburn is about $100,000. In Lewiston, it's about $1 million. So does this mean that Auburn is going to absorb all that cost? I'm concerned. I'm also concerned about having it, our taxes revalued. And are they going to be higher than they are now? Which isn't a very good thing as far as I'm concerned. The buildings that we have for Lewiston and Auburn, what's going to happen to one of them if we merge? If the school systems, I'm concerned about the school systems also. All the paperwork in order to do it, people who have said things, right, it's going to take a long time. This isn't going to happen overnight. But all I've heard here is generalities. Oh, it's going to be great, it's going to be this, but I don't hear what people's ideas are, and this commission that has made their decision, apparently. What new businesses are coming out? We go to the mall, and their businesses are leaving, and that's very difficult. So what other, businesses are we going to bring in to make it work? I frankly think that some of the issues that are in each of our towns, Auburn and Lewiston, need to be looked at and not completely solved, but better than they are now. In order, services, how many homeless we have. I mean, people may not want to think about that, but everywhere I go, I'm helping people find places. There isn't enough around. There should be. There's just all kinds of different things before we even think of doing any merging. We're not there yet. Not at all. And it's going to take years for people to focus. I also want to know, gee, if we merge this, does this mean that CityLink will now, the council will put back the money that they took out for the Auburn Mall shuttle? There are many people in Auburn who use that shuttle, and having a less shuttle has caused a lot of problems for senior citizens mainly, and people with disabilities. And I want to see expanded service. You can't have expanded service if you keep on pulling back. I attended some meetings and sent some remarks about the pedestrian, motorcycle, and bicycle situation, giving them ideas of what they can do in order to make it safe for everybody. And yes, they took my remarks and they filled out some of it. Is that going to really happen if we merge it? And it's not just in Auburn, it's also in Lewiston. Let's see. Trying to think what else. If this doesn't work, is this commission going to have an exit strategy? Okay, we've done this now. We've voted for this, and those that, are for this merger, hey, are you going to, how are we going to get out of it once we get in it? And I don't hear that happening at all. I'm afraid that I really have a problem with the name. I realize everybody wants Lewiston and Auburn. If this merger happens, I think we should can that out and find a total different name. Maybe something that combines us. I don't know if that really happens. I just really have a hard time because Auburn is just as important as Lewiston, and in their own different, unique ways, culture, whatever, history, it should be respected. So if we're going to throw this out and do a merger, for which I oppose, maybe we should have a contest. And then everybody would have some sort of a voice in what this name should be.
Stephanie?
So I think that I have probably hit the 5-minute mark because I keep on talking. Thank you very much.
Mayor, members of council, thank you very much for holding this public hearing in a well thought through way. I appreciate that. My name is Charles Morrison. We are living in our 40th year in the same house on Lake Street we moved into when we moved here. For the last 22 years, I've been crossing the river to go to work. A lot of people cross the river in both directions to go to work. Because when we moved here, there were people who lived in Auburn who had never been to Lewiston. And there were a lot more people in Lewiston who had never been to Auburn and said terrible things about people in Auburn. And so I've told you I moved here 40 years ago, and obviously I'm a little older than that, so I came from away, and I just plain didn't understand that. One of the previous speakers said it's a bigger world now. People are moving everywhere. They actually do cross the bridge. I bet there are not very many people in either city that don't go back and forth a lot. I know many of the folks in this room on both sides of this issue, and you hold your opinions strongly, and I respect those. And you know me. I've been working here for a long time, working for our communities. Last 3 years as a member of the Charter Commission, and a number of people have questioned our worth. One of the big questions that comes up is the savings question, and we'll answer some of the specific questions in detail. But I would ask the hypothetical question. Many in this room probably don't know that since 1996, we are the 4th group that has looked at consolidation savings. The first was in 1996, a group called LA Together, Joint Commission, and made a ton of recommendations to both cities. Nothing happened. In 2000, and they didn't quantify those recommendations in terms of how many dollars would be saved. They were individualized, but they weren't put together. In 2004 to 2006, the Lewiston Auburn Commission on Joint Services made similar recommendations, and they said those recommendations in 2006 dollars would save $2 million. Then in 2006 to 2009, there was the Citizens Commission on Lewiston Auburn Cooperation. The recommendations said that would save $2.7 million. That's just on the municipal side. I don't think that the modest recommendation put together by the Joint Charter Commission is anything but passes the straight face test. It's the same number, but for a smaller number, but for a larger number of departments. Why weren't those recommendations put together? The answer is pretty simple. There's no political will to do that. And before the Joint Charter Commission got started, and I went before the City Council with a number of representatives of the community and asked them if they would look at it, they said it's up to the people. So, we went out and gathered signatures. 2,500 people put their name on a dotted line to create the Joint Charter Commission. There were 6 people who were running for 3 positions in each community. Some might say that the ones that lost won because they didn't get to spend 3 years of their lives doing this. I'm thankful for the opportunity. I'll close by saying I think there are 3 major reasons to consolidate. Mr. Grime said it clearly, joint planning and joint economic development. We do things much better together than we do separately. And much bigger things can happen. Secondly, we improve our schools. A consolidated school department would have a depth of educational offerings. It would probably draw people to come here for the diversity of offerings. third, and I think it's, for some people it's a major thing, but I think it's, for others it's minor. We can show Maine, the United States, and the world that we can do something that's really big, and we can do it on our own, and we can scrap our way. I know the LA people pull together. You know, when somebody's house burns, hundreds of donations come in. When somebody's sick, we go help. That's what we do as Lewiston Auburn people. I'm one of those. I live here. I'm going to live here. I know we can do this together and make a better place for our kids and our grandkids. You know, Senator Mitchell said at a gathering here last December, he said, we got to stop thinking about our grandparents and start thinking about a place where our grandchildren will want to live. Thank you.
Those that are taxpayers in the city of Auburn that have interest in speaking want to begin lining up. We'll continue on with the hearing.
Hi, my name is Anil Legassi. I live on 211 Summer Street. I have very little to say, but I sit in my armchair and I listen to Priscilla, and then I listen to a lot of these people talk about this merger. I'm against it. Simple reason is I have yet to see a government agency that saves money. That's number one. Number two, we're talking about economic growth. Well, $10 an hour, you're not going to get people from the outside moving into Lewiston, Auburn. And we already have three names. We have Lewiston, we have Auburn, and we have the Twin Cities. Now, we don't have economic growth. That's on you people, not us. It's your job. You've been an elected official, and I'm calling you out on it. You're the one responsible to get it in here, not us. We pay taxes. We give you our hard-earned money. So there it is. School department, we need a better school. We need smarter kids. You get smarter kids by getting smarter teacher. I'm not saying the teachers are not smart. I'm just saying they're handicapped. They're being cut off. They say you have to follow certain rules. Your kids, your students have to pass a test. Go to McDonald's, go to Walgreens, go to wherever store you want. Put your hand over their cash register and says, okay, give me my change. Count it out. You will be amazed. Now, the school system, I probably already said it once, but that's on them, not on us. You want better school systems? Again, that's on you people that line the table. That's also on you, not on us. Because we give you our money in earnest. You are supposed to do what you need to do. I lived in Lewiston, I lived in Auburn. I love them both. My daughter went to Lewiston School because that's the school she wanted to. My son wanted Auburn School. Well, by Jesus, that's where we went. And that's the way it was. Trying to find a job in the Twin Cities with my experience, and there was a couple places I went to, they'll start you out at god-awfully $12.50 an hour. Can I afford your taxes on $12.50 an hour? I challenge anybody here that makes $12 an hour to survive on your own, by yourself. And I'm willing to bet you none of you can. That'd be a one-bedroom apartment, living check to check, week to week, and praying like heck. So if you want economic growth, step it up a notch. That's all I got to say.
Good evening, respected members of the Auburn City Council and Mayor. My name is Belinda Gary. I live at 143 Mill Street here in Auburn. Tonight I am here in opposition to this proposed new joint charter and the merger of Auburn and Lewiston. I was always taught 2 is always better than 1, and bigger is not always better. And physically, I found that out, that bigger isn't always better. But the point of bigger is not always better was driven home to me when I was privileged to be elected a state representative for the city of Auburn, and I was elected 3 times to serve Auburn. When you're in the legislature, it's not the number of legislators or senators that are in your city that represent you that gives you the most clout in Augusta. It's those that work together as a team. Lewiston, Auburn today could have more clout if all our representatives would band together and work even better with the city of Auburn, like they are doing now with Lewiston. We don't need to have clout to be big, to be competing with Bangor or Portland. Most people don't like big government because it represents more layers of bureaucracy and hoops its residents have to go through in order to get the help or answers they need to resolve an issue they're dealing with. Currently, Auburn has 5 ward city councilors and 2 at large. Each ward by population is an average of 3,000, give or take a few, residents. Auburn has a safety net with the addition of 2 at-large counselors, meaning if you can't connect with your ward counselor or if the issue is too complex and that they need help, they are able to give assistance to that ward counselor. Under this proposed new charter and possible city, this net is removed, and the workload these counselors will have and residents they now serve will slightly more than double, because we're not going from 7 counselors on each side like we have today, but 10 city counselors. And their 10 wards will be based on population. And if that's the case, if you use the number of 6,000 rounded off residents, that's 6,000, but I think it's slightly more. So that's why I said it's slightly more. This potential will be real for some residents to fall within the cracks because these new counselors won't or can't keep up with every situation that arises and still be able to juggle their regular jobs and home life in between. To be a city councilor, you don't make the big bucks. It's not like being a senator or a state representative where you get a lot of money. Auburn only gets $150 a month to pay for constituent services and to help with things that the city don't pay for. Another reason they say we should merge is to increase our economic development capability and to stop us from competing with each other. A little competition challenges our economic development staff to keep them on their top game. To keep their game, to keep them on top of their game, to keep up with the various new programs and grants out there to help our local businesses expand and to attract new businesses in our area. They also work with the city manager and the council to find out what monies that the city's budget can afford that can be reallocated to help our existing businesses or business expansions. Previous city councils have developed mechanisms and joint agreements currently in place to minimize this impact of them competing. Both cities have neighborhood groups that have formed with new ones being formed to help revitalize and rebuild their community and its spirit within our cities. If we merge our two cities, the competition will be switched from our local city governments, our city council and staff that are able to handle it. It'll be switched to those neighborhood groups, some of which are not equipped to deal with being pitted one against another, whether it is just to get their city councilors' representation or in competing for necessary funding for projects that are needed in their areas.
Belinda,
Yes.
just another minute if you could.
Okay. Both cities and their residents have developed plans and their projects started to revitalize their city and to help put them in better financially position to rebuild their tax base in order to lower property taxes, attract new businesses, and job growth. Is this all for nothing? Will this all be put on hold? Do we start all over and everything we've done thus far for nothing? I am against this merger not because I am stuck in Auburn's past and can't move forward, but because I want to preserve Auburn's future.
I'm Betty Perkins. I live at 208 Broad Street in Auburn. And I have a couple of questions to ask. Who's going to pay for all the signs that have to be changed on the turnpike on Route 4, 202, 100, and 196? We have a lot of streets in Auburn and Lewiston that have the same name. What is going to happen to these streets? And what are we going to tell our children if they change our street and they are 3, 4, and 5 years old and their mother has drilled into their head their address and they get a change of address? Have you told the residents of Auburn that will be paying a rain tax? Because Lewiston already pays a rain tax. And this is just for the people out here. Anyone who has a driver's license is going to have to get a new one. Anyone that has a passport will have to get a new one. If you have a checking account, you will have to purchase new checks. You will have to notify your credit card company, life insurance, car insurance, house insurance of your change of address.
If there is anyone who's neither a taxpayer or a citizen that would like to come forward at this point in the hearing, the floor is open.
Good evening. My name is Louise DeCoto. I live at 65 Lucille Street in Auburn. And I'm a teacher and have been for a long time. I'm retired. But I've seen communities come together out of necessity, and it hasn't always worked out to the best educational interest of the children. And I think of Northern Maine, where a child gets on a school bus and travels for 20 miles before they can get to the school that they need to go to. And that's not bad if you're in high school, but if you're 6 years old, that's a challenge. It's a challenge to the families to put their kids on a bus at 6 o'clock in the morning and not see them till 4:30. It's a long day. I hope that we all consider what's in the best educational interest of the children. In the 80s, they had this No Child Left Behind, and I think it was more like No Teacher Left Standing. It wasn't well thought out. It was really challenging, and I would like to encourage the best educational interest of our children. I've heard financial gain, and I appreciate that. I'm a taxpayer. When my dear sister was in real estate, most people wanted to move to Auburn because of the school systems. And I think we can develop committees between Lewiston and Auburn to enhance the value of the education in both committees without merging the communities. I see trying to merge communities, Sabattis, Litchfield, Wales, they're another situation where kids are on school buses for a long time, and that doesn't seem right. I'm sure it saves money somehow. But it's not good for my little nephew who's 6 years old on a school bus for 45 minutes. That's just wrong. It's just wrong. I think we can do better. I think also if we merge, we have Lewiston with a higher population and a greater voting interest for whatever suits them than what Auburn has. So when you get to the polls, whatever Lewiston wants is what is going to happen, whether it's in the best interest of Auburn or not. And that's concerning to me. Anyway, think of the kids.
All right, I didn't know if I would come and speak here tonight at all. I was kind of nervous, but it is kind of emotional for me in a way, but I'm not really convinced. I don't know all the projections with money here and there, but whenever I look at the words power and money, I get a little skeptical. You know, I drive down Center Street and I see all these, you know, LA1 signs, and there's one dealership that this one guy has made millions over that I got messed over once by a vehicle a long time ago. Wasn't really addressed. I'm not going to mention any of that. There's this big floating sign about there, you know, driving home one night from an out-of-town engagement, and I see this thing just flashing. It says, I just feel like this is being shoved down our throat in a sense. And I have a lot of questions about the money thing. You know, I've read the letters to the editors. People have worked on both sides of the city. I've been to council meetings. Some of this stuff, I'm not really convinced that this is a good idea. What's it going to do? Location, location, location. What happened with the east-west thing? That's not going to work. You know, Allagash, North Maine, where are you going to move Augusta State House to Presque Isle? You know, it doesn't matter. You know, like one gentleman said earlier, there's 60-mile radius. If a business sees real estate that they like, they're going to move into there. The economy is not going to be that great. The world is changing today. We have an online system going on where a lot of stores are closing. The Kmart in Auburn, which I've gone to many, many, many years, is, you know, is lucky to be alive. You know, Walmart, all these big conglomerates, monopolies are trying to take over. This is not the way it should be. And I don't think this is going to make any difference. We're not going to see any of that. I really don't believe that at all. So, you know, I've been a New Auburn boy all my life. You know, I have emotions about that. I've lived in Auburn most of my life, was born in Biddeford, lived in, you know, my father was promoted to state police from New Auburn. You know, we lived in Skowhegan for a while, 4 years old, New Auburn, been all my life. But I've worked in Lewiston for like 27 years. I've shopped. I've spent my disposable income in Lewiston and Auburn. I don't see how this is going to change anything. It's just going to add more confusion. And when you add politics and power and money, like I said, I get very skeptical about that. Thank you much.
Hi, my name is Mark Sear. I live at 121 Poliquin Avenue. My father, I was a Lewiston boy. I went to Wallace, I went to St. Peter's and Paul's. And then I want to say about the third grade, my father decided to move to Auburn. Now, being a Sear, as most of you French people know, there's a lot of Sears. My mother's a Karen. Now, you know there's a lot of Karens. Out of all my relatives, my father is the only one to cross the river. All my relatives live in Lewiston. And on the way over here, I happened to call my cousins real quick. Hey, one quick question. Yay or nay? merger or no? All of them, no. I didn't have a chance to ask them why, but they all said no. So as I'm driving from home, I thought to myself, why did my father, I wish my father was alive, I would ask him, why did you move to Auburn? Then, it came to me. I think it was maybe because of the education system. He worked for Fordland, retired at Fordland, worked there for like 45 years. I went through, like I say, I went through Franklin School when it was not the Franklin School that we know today. And then I went to Sacred Heart, then I went to Chamberlain, then I went to Webster, I went to Washburn, then finally Walton and Yale. Yeah, I went through a lot of schools. My wife, she's a graduate. I graduated in '77. I just had my class reunion. It was great to see, my classmates and your dad. My wife's from Lewiston. She graduated in '76. So 25 years ago, I was in the service, in the reserves. I was getting ready to get deployed on Desert Storm. And my wife says, well, what are we going to do? I said, well, you know what? I want to buy a house. We saved money. Let's buy a house. So I said, where do you want to go? She goes, well, I'd like to stay in Lewiston. That didn't work. We looked at Sabatis. We looked at Minot. We looked at Hebron. I wanted to live out in the country, only because of the taxes. So then I said, well, we're going to have kids. I think the Auburn school system is good. My sister's a teacher. So I said, let's look around. So we settled at Poliquin Avenue for 25 years. We've been there. Both my boys went to EL. In the big picture, is the money the issue? I mean, I try to break it down real quick. I'm going to say hypothetically, say the mill rate in Lewiston is 5, and we're at 4. Okay? We merge together. Now, can someone tell me, will that mill rate go up? Because we know it's not going to go down. I don't think it's going to go down. Granted, I know Auburn is going to need a school. From what I hear, we're going to look at a school, and my tax is going to go up. Yeah. So Lewiston people, are they going to say, do they really want to suck up that burden too? I have a hard time understanding where, like the gentleman said, where's this money? How is this going to work out? I mean, we know, but the problem is we'll have to vote to be one LA, and then we're going to figure out what the fallout is? Will we get feedback before we vote? That's my concerns, because I really hate to put the cart in front of the horse. That's what I feel like. That's what's about to happen. So other than that, I'm definitely against it. Auburn pride, and that's about it. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, members of the public. My name is Peter Whitmore. I'm a resident of Naples, Florida. So you say, what's he doing speaking here? I'm speaking now because I have 14 years invested in political life representing the citizens of Auburn as a city councilor, as mayor, and a former senator. And I have to tell you right up front, I'm opposed to any kind of a merger. And I guess my first question is, how many people in this room have read the document that is online? It's 82 pages long. It's the letter of June 30th. How many people in this room have read it? 10? The purpose of tonight's meeting, the council's already done everything they can do. They've scheduled a meeting date. Hello? Did you shut me off? Done everything that they can do. They've scheduled a meeting for a vote, excuse me. They've set the vote for November 7th. And along with that same day, you'll be voting for a new council, a new mayor, and so will the city of Lewiston. I've found over the years it's not the fact that Lewiston and Auburn are separated by a river, but it's more who's in political office is what changes the climate between Lewiston and Auburn. When I had been on the council and mayor, but the election in 1979, which was held on November 7th, ironically, Paul Dion was elected mayor of Lewiston, and I was elected mayor of Auburn. And that became a joint endeavor to look at possibly merging, but very loosely, but more how can we get together as the two cities? What can we do to save money? What can we do to progress? Two people in this room were part of that committee, Lucian Gosselin and Chip Morrison, who you heard speak earlier. We did put things together. We formed LEAGC, in fact. The purpose of that was to break from two committees or two departments into one, because a job in Lewiston or a business in Lewiston is just as good as a business or a job in Auburn, because we are and we have been one community. I've seen more disparity since this document has been published, with differences between the two communities, than I've ever seen in my life. And I'm in my 78th year. I was an Auburn resident, born in Lewiston like everybody else in the world. Moved to Auburn, you know, as a handful, and been here since up until the time I retired. And I don't want to shovel any more snow. And so we've taken the route to head south. But my heart is still here. We have family here. Our son is a businessman here. We have grandchildren here. And to merge the two cities is not going to accomplish a thing. You talk about growing the economy. Growing the economy is not really going to start here. Stop and think about this. Maine has projected a very poor business climate. And until it gets changed at a state level, we're not going to attract the companies to come in from out of state. It's been an anti-business, whether it's workers' comp, whatever it is, environmental laws, it's been anti-business. And until that changes, the merger of Lewiston and Auburn is not going to do a thing to increase job rate, salary levels, or anything else. The only three I'm here is that it's out of their hands. It's now in your hands. Get out and vote on November 7th, and be sure to tell your neighbors, your friends, and everybody else that one vote that we each have is all important. Thank you.
Last call for any speakers this evening before I close the hearing.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Ron Potvin, former city councilor in Auburn, former school committee in Auburn, presently vice chair of the coalition opposing this Lewiston-Auburn consolidation. I'm presently living in Lewiston now. 4 years ago, I moved across the river for whatever health reasons, family reasons, and so forth. But I still honor the commitment that many of you gave me to be an elected official here. And when this whole idea came back, you know, I personally was involved in this several years ago. As Chip Morrison stated, 4 times this has come up. So far, Auburn has seen 4 generations of councils disband it and step away from it. And there's a reason for that. And I was on the most recent council that disbanded the Joint Services Committee back then in 2008. That is, no matter how you look at this, there's a cost factor. And elected officials have a fiscal responsibility to their constituents, to their city, not to incur pain or additional financial strains on what's already a very high-taxed area. There was no compelling reason for us to want to move forward on that. And you have 4 generations of councils that have said no. We had a responsibility to oppose this. Now it comes in a different form. Now it comes on a charter commission by, a referendum, by signatures. I think, whenever you're going to change, whenever you're going to eliminate a city off the map, there's got to be substantial reasons to do so. What has this charter commission offered? Maybes, could-be's. Do we want to try it? I simply ask you all to look at what's factual. They spent money on a consultant for another report that basically said the same thing other reports have done in the past. To answer one of the gentlemen that just was up here, what does happen to Auburn's taxes? Their own consultant in page 74 shows that Auburn taxes increase. Why? Because Auburn and Lewiston are equal in valuation, but their spending is not. Lewiston has a higher tax levy than Auburn. You put the two together, it splits right down the middle. And you, the Auburn taxpayers, will be subsidizing Lewiston operations. And that's part of the reason why these joint services have been such an ache to the political bodies that have had to deal with it. Because whether you want to talk about 911 or you want to talk about the Growth Commission or any of the items that the two cities get together, back in the day, 30 years ago, it might have been a good idea to take two communities and just split the cost down in half. But when I had to deal with the reval in 2005, and then I was elected to office, I realized that wasn't such a great idea anymore because basically Auburn taxpayers are subsidizing operations of Lewiston. And that's why the Economic Growth Council fell apart. There wasn't a tremendous value to the city of Auburn. Now, I'm 18 years in Auburn, and I'm now 4 years in Lewiston, but I'm a Bostonian, born and brought up in Boston. My parents are from here. They moved down with the Canadian immigration and moved to Boston in the 60s to find work. I got involved in politics down there, and there was one thing that was very certain. We worked together in groups of cities. Every aspect of political life was jointly taken together with Boston and Cambridge and Somerville and Brookline. We formed commissions. We respected each other's lines and cost and responsibilities. We funded according to population because we figured that would be what the use would be. Our recreation, our highways, our transportation infrastructure. The key is if this is such a great thing to do, wouldn't there be a ton of communities across the country that have done this? And yet there's only maybe 30 out of 19,000 communities. So now this Charter Commission wants to push this again and make Lewiston Auburn one of the first set of two cities to be the guinea pigs to try this out. When their own consultant says your taxes are going up. When their own consultant says there is $1.5 million of expenses that come with this so-called savings. And I don't want to tell you what happens in Lewiston. Lewiston has even more issues because they're going to get hit with a reval of the same size that everybody here went through in 2005. There's a bad idea. Vote no against it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Gene Geiger, and I'm chair of the Joint Charter Commission. I really don't want to spend a lot of time responding to things. That's not my purpose tonight, and I've been recording everything on a recorder here so that we can go back and listen to what everybody said and properly respond as has been suggested by the mayor. I'll just say one or two things here. It is factually untrue that our study says that Auburn's taxes will go up. So let's just be really clear. That is not what the report said. It does not say that. And I'll just say that I understand fully the concerns of taxes, taxpayers, big government getting bigger, and so on. But if small is good, we could cut Auburn into 4 little slices and have a smaller community still and save a whole lot of money. That's not the case. And I'll just say that thank you all for making your points. We're listening well to what you have to say, and we'll see what elements we can learn from what was said, and we will appropriately respond as the mayor suggested we should.
No, I'm sorry. If you guys would like to speak after, you're welcome to. No. At this point, I will close the public hearing. Just a couple of items. I want to thank our city clerk, Sue, who has been here taking notes and helped with the logistics this evening, as well as our city management I mentioned earlier. Phil and Brian from Great Falls TV that brought all of our technology out here so we could record tonight's proceeding and make it available on local access. As Chairman Geiger mentioned and I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to provide a record of this meeting to the Joint Charter Commission and ask them to respond to questions as well as if they have further comments or feedback based on comments that were made here tonight. The content of that and the format will be left to the Joint Charter Commission. They are their own separate elected body. But I will say that the city will do what we can. Certainly the Sun Journal is here, but we have other communication channels. When we receive what they have for responses, we'll ensure we do what we can to broadcast that so folks can have access, whether it's in City Hall, the library where the agreement's made available. We want to make sure folks have access to information. So with that, I would entertain a motion from the council to adjourn tonight's meeting. Motion from Councilor Walker and a second from Councilor Burns. Those in favor of adjournment will be adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming out.